Welcome back. In this video, we're going to set up our wish repository, which allows us to keep the DAO class away from the presentation layers and only access its methods through the repository. So we're going to set up this repository, which basically adds a link to our DAO, and then we can use our view model to use the repository to take care of all of these suspend functions, right? So adding a wish suspendingly, then suspend the update wish and so forth. Okay, so to start, a repository is an abstraction layer that handles data operations. It provides a clean API for data access to the rest of the application. Now, regarding the Room database, the repository takes on the responsibility of interacting with the database on behalf of the view model. It uses DAO, so the data access object, so this DAO here, to make queries to the database. So these are the queries to the database. Also, inserting is also a query, which means it can perform CRUD operations like we have here. So create, read, update, delete. This separation of concerns ensures that the view model doesn't need to worry about the origin of the data, be it from the Room database, a web service, or any other data source. So that's the power of a view model. I told you that before, but now we're actually seeing it in action. So the view model doesn't really care where the data is coming from. It just knows which methods to call, or it just calls the methods. Basically, we need to implement them. But what happens in the background, it doesn't care about. And what happens in the background is what we're setting up here, for example, with our wish DAO. So that wish DAO we're going to use inside of the repository, which then is another connection layer, so to speak, to talk to our view models. So our view model is just going to call the wish repository, and that will then link to the wish DAO. All right. So the repository pattern is also part of the recommended Android app architecture. So we're not doing that for fun. It's actually the go-to approach. So the best practices when it comes to using Room databases. It makes the code more robust and maintainable, and it is particularly useful in scenarios where the data comes from multiple sources. Well, in our case, it just comes from one source. But if we were to decide to change that in the future, where it's not just coming from our Room database, but potentially also from a cloud database, then it would make it so much easier, where we basically just call the same method, but then it knows which of the operations to take care of. So we don't need to change anything in our UI or whatever. The view model doesn't need to change. It just gets the data from somewhere else. So that's really the power here. So let's go ahead and set up that new item. So this wish repository, this will be a new class wish repository, like so. So this wish repository needs a DAO that we need to pass to it. So I'm going to call this one wish DAO, which will be our wish DAO. Okay, so it will require to implement all the relevant functions that we can now call. So for example, we have this function called add a wish, which requires us to pass in a wish that we want to add. So a wish object. And what it will do is it will use that wish DAO to call its add wish function with that wish that we're passing to it. Now, the thing is, this has to happen asynchronously, which is the reason we need to add the suspend keyword here. And the next thing that we're going to do is get all wishes. So this function will use flow with a list of wishes. And therefore, it's just going to use our wish DAO and get all the wishes. Now, we need to import flow for this to work. And this flow, by the way, is get wishes, like so. This flow, by the way, is taking care of this function being a suspend function automatically, because it basically returns something that will use a coroutine. So an asynchronous data stream that sequentially emits values and completes normally or with an exception. Okay, so that will call our get all wishes function. So we had the add wish a wish. Now we're getting the get all wishes function, And now we can go ahead and get a wish by its ID. So I need to pass the ID that I want to get, and this will also use the flow with, well, returning a flow wish. Okay, so here I'm just saying what I want to return, and the return will be a wish DAO dot get wish by ID, passing in the ID. All right, and then we need our other two functions where we update a wish, for example, and we just say which wish we want to use. And we use our wish DAO to call the update a wish function, passing in the wish. And finally, we do the same thing for our last method. So let's look at that. The delete a wish method is still missing, our function. So delete a wish, we need to pass which wish we want to delete, and then we call our wish DAO once again, where we just say delete a wish, and we say which wish we want to delete. Okay, so that's pretty much our wish repository, and I'm going to call it wish repository repository. There we are. Holy moly. So now we have our wish repository, but you see it's all grayed out in a sense that we're not using it yet. This add a wish method is not used, get wishes is not used, none of those things are used yet. And we're going to change that the moment we're going to implement it inside of our view model. Okay, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. So see you there.